Okay, so recording is on. This is office hours on Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. So what questions are you bringing today?
My first question is regarding problems like number 2 in the homework tonight. Could you do an example of a scenario, not one of the scenarios you've given us in the homework, but could you go through an example of a scenario of what we're supposed to have for the scenarios in number 2?
All right.
I watched the 3rd demonstration video, and I feel like that's, or the 4th, the one you just posted.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And that's why I created
And
that one.
I feel like it's that, but I'm still struggling with it. So if you could do a different scenario, that would be really helpful.
It is that. That is that. And that's why I created that actually. So I knew that I knew that there were individual demonstration videos about each one of the curves, but not the whole thing as a whole. So let me think for a moment. Let's see. So there are only so many questions I can ask, actually. So let's start by doing this. Maybe this will generate one. So I'm talking about chapter 4. And there are 2 parts to this, right? Desired saving and desired investment. Okay. And one of the things I point out in that demonstration video is that these curves, that's the graphical representation of it, but the conceptual idea about desired saving has to do with who making decisions in the economy. What group of people?
The consumer?
Consumers, households.
Are we supposed to be able to see what you're writing?
Oh yeah, sorry. That
Just want to make sure.
That would help, wouldn't it? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It was making total sense to me. Sorry. Yes, indeed. Sorry about that. All right. Better. So I meant to start with that, open up actually, but so this is consumers and households. And who makes decisions about investment? This is critical.
The buyer? That was Felita's answer.
What buyer of what?
Stocks?
No, not stocks. Investment does not have to do with the stock market. All right. That's why part of the reason I'm asking it. Nothing to do with the stock market, nothing to do with financial markets, nothing to do with that. Well, that's something. Well, no, it doesn't have anything to do with that really. So investment, if you go back to chapter 2, we're measuring GDP, C plus I plus G plus net exports. Remember when we were back in those earlier chapters, that like everything we do from chapter 1 on is going to come back and circle around, in some cases multiple times throughout the course. So we can't forget it. So I'm going to go back to that. we did a homework about what's in looking at how do we measure GDP? What's in investment? Capital. Machines. Buildings. Railroad cars. Semi-trucks. Also, we have software. Also, investment included residential investment, residential housing. But the part that we really want to focus on is this part up here. So who buys machines and buildings and semi-trucks, etc.?
Who buys them?
Mm-hmm.
The consumer still.
No, consumers don't buy them. Not the way we think. No, they don't. Yeah, not generally. Houses they do. That part of investment they do. But what is investment spending in terms of GDP focusing on? Firms, right? Producers.
That's what I was about to say was like a company, but I didn't know.
Yeah. No dumb questions, nor no dumb answers. Like just put it out there. All right. I'll never make anybody feel bad about that. No, producers, right? So consumers and producers are intersecting in the which market? The goods market. All right. So these graphs are not just like graphs that just fall out of the sky. These graphs are representing people.
Okay.
And decisions that people are making. That's what economics is all about. So it's this, and what do firms want to do? We learned about this in chapter 3. And in microeconomics, even principles, not even intermediate. You don't need intermediate for this class, but principles of microeconomics. But in
My camera's not on.
But in chapter 3, what do firms, what are they trying to do? What's our assumption in our model? You know it. I know you do.
Increase revenue?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's half of it. What else? What do they care about ultimately? If you run a business, if you start a business, if you run a business, you start a food truck or any kind of business, what do you care about?
Profit.
Yeah, profits. Yeah, exactly. Right? Maximizing profits. Revenue, total revenues minus total costs. So total revenue is part of it. You also want to minimize your costs, right? So what do consumers want to do? Well, they want to maximize their utility, satisfaction, happiness. So what do consumers do? What's the root word in consumers?
Consume.
They consume.
Buy, purchase.
They buy stuff, consume. So the decision in chapter 4, right? It's all about, and there's a story in there, a little vignette that talks about, that runs through that, right? Is how much to buy, how much to consume today versus how much to consume in the future. Let's just call it tomorrow. Sometime in the future. All right? That's the decision. That's the decision that underlies the desired saving curve. So, and if you're really adventurous, you can look in the appendix to chapter 4. It's not required. It's not part of what you're assigned to do. If you had intermediate microeconomics, most of you probably have not. But if you did, sorry, I'm not watching the chat. So if somebody, I see that. After we go over through question 2, we go over question 3. Yeah, question 2 and question 3 are very similar. Right? The same ideas are going to come into play. Right? Same ideas. So question is, what determines whether people want to buy stuff today or tomorrow? And how is that related to saving, desired saving? Well, this is very similar to labor supply in chapter 3. In chapter 3, households, consumers, were deciding how much leisure to buy, or how or to get, to buy essentially, right? Not with money, but time. How much leisure were they going to consume? Whatever was left in the day, those are labor supply hours. That's our model. So here, the question is, how much are people going to consume today? Whatever they consume today, whatever is left, or whatever they decide about that, whatever is left out of their income is saving. So if they decide to save or consume more today, less saving today. Consume less today, then more saving today. Okay? So it's a derived thing. For firms, they're trying to decide how much capital to purchase to maximize profits. In chapter 3, what did firms do? They were trying to decide how much labor to purchase or to hire, right, to maximize profits. Capital is just another input in their production process, right? Labor and capital, technology, all go to make stuff, right? So that's the backdrop. So the question then is, what affects those decisions by consumers? What affects those decisions by firms? Now, in the chapter, there are 2 summary tables. And one is, I don't remember what the numbers are, but there's one in the desired saving section, there's one in the desired investment section. And those summary tables list which things affect each of these. So under that summary table over here, wealth, expected future income, current income, taxes, interest rates. Those tables are really, 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 really important. They're like the cliff notes, right, for the chapter. Under investment, it's the future marginal productivity of capital. In the user cost of capital, which has to do with the interest rate, the real interest rate. So it's R, right? The real interest rate. And things like corporate taxes. Sorry. So then the question is, what are the things that affect expected future marginal productivity of capital? That's the slope of the production function with capital on the axis. So things like A, right, affect that. Right. All right. So now with that in mind, we said, well, can we do an example that's different than the one in the homework, but essentially an analog of that? So, and there are other things that could affect this too, but those are kind of the big ones, right? So, and this is for the whole economy, not just for individuals. Let me give you an example though, as for an individual, and then we'll do one that just talks about this more generally. So if so as an individual, if you're getting ready to graduate, you haven't graduated yet from college, and you're going to graduate in May, let's say, and it's April, and you already have a big job offer. You're going to get $70,000, $80,000 when you graduate. Like, you're maybe making $10,000 now, whatever, 20,000, a lot less. So that new job, what does that mean? That means your expected future income has gone up, right? What might you do in April or May? Well, maybe you go out and buy a new car, Like, because why? Because I'm gonna have income to pay off that loan with that new job. But you don't have that new income yet. So right now, your consumption has gone up today, right? And your saving, therefore, has gone down today. That's an example. All right?
Okay.
On a personal level. So now let's broaden that out. So now let's put that into practice. All right, so let's say that, oops. One of the things, well, here's something that gets well, here's something that gets measured every month. Consumer confidence. It's reported in the Wall Street Journal. All right. What happens if what happens if people's consumer confidence, their confidence about the economy, their jobs, etc. What happens if that goes down?
Productivity.
Is that going to affect consumption, or is that going to affect investment? First of all, right? Because these are the two different curves. Which market, which curve, which way, what happens? That's the mantra. Right. Well, that's kind of given right here, right?
I was gonna say, I feel like it would affect consumption.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a trick question here, right? So, if consumer confidence, if you're not feeling as good about the economy, right? What are you gonna you're gonna go out and take a big trip? Gonna buy a new car? Gonna buy a new house?
Normal
Probably not,
people,
right?
yeah.
Probably gonna hunker down. Probably gonna save more, consume less. All right. So that probably leads to less consumption today. So now let's think about this. So here's the goods market, right? Everything we do in this homework has to do with the goods market, right? So we're eventually going to put them all together, but we do them one by one. Chapter 3, labor market, production function. Chapter 4, goods market. What's on the vertical axis in the goods market?
Real interest rate.
The real interest rate, all right, which is the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. All right, what's on the horizontal axis?
Investment or savings.
Investment or saving. Yep. So desired saving is upward sloping, desired investment is downward sloping. We'll come back to that. Why that is, we'll come back to that. That's question number 1. Okay. So equilibrium, there's the equilibrium level. Investment and saving, they're equal. That's the point in equilibrium. Here's the equilibrium real interest rate. This is our starting point. This is the starting graph for 2 scenario A, 2 scenario B, 2 scenario C. Question 3. All of them. All right, they're all the same. I'm just giving you lots of different practice with this. All right, they're all the same. They're all versions of the same thing. They're only ultimately there are only 4 things that can happen. It's like a multiple choice question. Either desired saving shifts, and then it either shifts to the left or to the right. Shift to the left, it's a decrease. Shift to the right, increase, right? Because we're measuring that on the horizontal axis. Increases to the right, decreases to the left. Not up and down, left and right. Okay. Or something's going to shift desired investment. And it's either going to shift to the left or to the right. Even if you're guessing, you got a 25% chance of being right. Okay? There are only 4 possibilities. There are only 4 possible things that can happen. All right. Well, we've narrowed this one down. So if we consume less today, that means for the current real interest rate, desired savings is going to increase, right? I mean, these two just go together. Remember, private saving is your income plus any transfer payments you get, right? Plus any interest payments you get, minus your consumption. We're going to assume that those, well, right now they might change, right? Well, and minus any taxes, right? Right, as well. So any taxes you might have to pay. So, right, you are now you're consuming less. So you got more in your pocket, right? More that you're saving. Whatever you don't, so there are only 2 things you can do with your money in the way we think about this, right? The simple model, right? You either spend it or you save it. That's it. All right. So now, which way is the curve gonna, which way is the desired saving curve gonna shift?
Left.
I'd say right.
And Felita, this was your in the chat. Is that your what you're saying to the left as well? All right. Right. So we got 2 to 1. 2 to 1 to the left. Why? So Felita can't talk. All right. So Michelle, it's up to you. You said left, right? Correct.
I said left. Brittany
Oh,
said left.
oh, Brittany. Oh, sorry, Brittany. You said left. So tell me why left.
My brain is telling me left because it would go up the investment curve. But I feel like that's wrong now. The more that I stare at it.
Michelle, why right?
Said to the right because you said as consumer spending or consumer confidence goes down, the savings goes up. So I've said to the right because just looking at, I mean,
Oh.
that was just logical for me. I don't have really an explanation behind it.
No, but your intuition is right. So intuition is okay in economics, even though we're trying to bound that intuition, right, and add some meat on that, right, and formalize it. But intuition can be okay because they help us start us in the right direction, right?
Right.
And so here's the level of saving to begin with, right? S0, right? And you're saying that savings is going to go up, right? I mean, that makes sense, right? If consumer confidence goes down in the economy, people are going to save more, right?
Right.
Which way is saving bigger? That way, right?
Right.
So savings is going to increase. Shift to the right, because that's bigger, right?
That makes sense.
So what's going to happen? Well, there's a surplus of saving relative to the amount of investment. So investment, right? Remember what investment is. It's firms wanting to buy new capital. How do they buy that? Well, they got to borrow to get that money, right? They got to borrow, right? And so now there's more saving, right? And so there's an excess, there's more saving than there is demand for that saving from the firms for investment, right? That's what it means, right? The investment's still back here. Oh, come on. It's still, investment's still, I keep losing my pen up here. So investment is there, saving is now out here, right? What do we call that? Supply of saving is greater than the demand for investment. That's a surplus, right? What happens? The price goes down when there's a surplus. What's going to happen? The interest rate's going to go down, and we're going to end up at a new equilibrium. lower real interest rate, higher level of investment, higher level of saving.
So for question number 2, because, and I'm glad that Brittany had asked when we first started off, because that's what I was stuck on was 2 and scenario B. Are you wanting the individual graphs for each scenario? Because what I did was I just did a large graph and then I broke down in my scenarios as to what would happen with the lines and or the curves.
So what does it say at the beginning of question 2?
Question 2, give me 1 second. Let me see. Question 2, it says use a graph of the goods market to determine how each event would affect.
What does it say before that? You skipped the line.
Oh, for each of the scenarios listed below. Okay. So I got you.
How many graphs did you have?
I only had 1, but now I need to go back and have 3.
That's right.
Okay.
I just wanted to work through that with you. I wasn't being facetious about it.
No, I'm glad you did that, because that make sense to me. I didn't know. I was confused at first when I first started out. I was like, okay, is he for each graph or what?
Yeah.
Can you back up your explanation for about 60 seconds? Your
Say that
R1
again?
right there. Can you back up just a little bit?
Yes. Yeah.
So it got a little congested right here. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding everything correctly. So our savings moved over.
Right. So
but
now
the
there are more
investment
savings, and at the original interest rate R0, firms only want S0. They want to borrow S0 essentially for new capital. Now there's more saving than that. There's a surplus of money in banks essentially than people want to borrow, than firms want to borrow. What's going to happen whenever there's a surplus? The price is the interest rate here. It's price and quantity always in the axes, and so we're going to end up at a new equilibrium there where lines cross matter, right? In economics,
right.
we're going to go from A to B. But there's a reason. But I was just pointing out the reason, the economics behind that, why that's the case.
And so at that new point where they cross, that is our I1. It's not, because the savings is more over to the right.
Right. So in the end, in equilibrium, when investment and saving are equal again at B, the real interest rate has gone down. Come on. And the level of saving and investment has increased. Right? Let's call it I1 and S1, right? I1 is bigger than S0. I and S1 are bigger than I and S0.
Okay, I think that's where I was getting held up. I had put my S1 over more to the right, not at the equilibrium. So that's
yeah, I mean, no, that's fine. Right. So okay, that's the way I wrote it. All right. So let's call it I2 and S2 at B then, which is what I was starting to do. Right. So right. So let's call this S1, and we'll call this I2. My eye pencils are so sensitive that I just have to hover over something and then go and then it undoes it. So this is, let's call it I2 and S2. All right. So I2 and S2 are bigger than I0 and S0.
okay.
Right. This is it's got, bigger numbers to the right. Right.
Makes perfect
sense.
Yes.
If this was 100, this might be 120. Right. For example. Right. Or some other number bigger than 100. So the name of the game, right? The game that we're playing here, all right? We want to call it that, right? The analysis that we're doing is we're going to translate words into our graph. Something happens to the graph, and then we figure out in the end, when all the dust settles, what happens. All right. So remember also that this saving line is private saving plus government saving. So this one had to do with private saving, right? That's what caused the shift in that line, right? So the private saving going up is what caused that shift of the line. It could also, things that could also shift that line have to do with the government, right? So if the government, so what would cause national saving? What would cause saving by the government to go up? Well, saving by the government is the budget surplus. If it's negative, it's the budget deficit, right? Again, you can go back to chapter 2. And I advise you to go back and look at that in chapter 2. It's in the uses of saving identity part. Right? And so what will happen? What will happen to shift this to the right? The government spend. Sorry, no, don't write that down. Don't write that down. Don't write that down. That's a slip of the pen. All right. Government spending goes down. Our taxes, right, would, the taxes going up would generate more revenue for the government, right? And so that is going to, if you think about this, what else is going to happen? Let's say it's income taxes. You increase income taxes, they take more money out of your check, right? So government savings going up, but private saving, right? You're going to reduce consumption, but you're also going to reduce private saving. So, you know, private saving might actually go down if taxes go up, but government savings is going to go up even more. So if the government increases taxes by $100, you're not going to increase your saving by $100, probably. You're going to reduce it by something less than that. So overall, the change in the government saving plus the private saving is going to end up shifting that to the right in that case. If you go back and look in that, in the book, in those summary tables that I was talking about, all right? Let me, I'm going to do this sort of in the back. You aren't going to see it right now because I have it in front of that screen. I'm going to switch the screen to this, to the other one that I'm bringing up here in a moment. I'm going to actually show you what I'm talking about. I have to log into Blackboard first. And then I need to bring up the textbook. So bear with me just for a moment. So I'm going to stop that share. I'm going to share a different screen. All right, so I actually have it open already to chapter 4. Right, there's the saving and investment curve, right? That we were just looking at, what I was drawing. Right, in the chapter, if we go through each one of the sections in the chapter, right? Change in current income, change in expected future income, change in wealth, effective changes in the interest rate, effective changes in fiscal policy, which has to do with taxes and government spending. So any of those things, right? And I'm going to scroll up because I'm going to show you ultimately here what I'm talking about in terms of that table. So here's the summary table, all right? So this summary table is what I'm saying is really important. An increase in current income is going to cause national saving to rise. A rise is right, a move to the right. Expected future output, wealth, right? So remember, this is about saving, not about consumption. It's it's what you have left after saving. So why? So wealth, for example, wealth increasing, right, would cause you to want to spend more. You're more likely to take a vacation or, go out to eat or whatever. And so you're going to increase consumption. So out of your current income, not your wealth, your current income, you're going to end up spending more. So desired saving falls in that case. It's a shift to the left of the saving curve, right? If government purchases increase, these are all increases, right? National saving is going to fall. Why? Because that's going to increase the budget deficit. Right? Higher taxes may cause saving to rise. That's what I just had on the screen before. All right. In the investment section, right? Like there's only, it's either about saving or investment. There are only two things that this is about in this chapter. There are only two things in this chapter, right? So if you go through the profit maximization here, and ultimately investment, inventories, and housing, I think it's at the end. That table's at the end of this. I'm not sure, actually. I'm gonna find out. No, it's not. See if it's here. I think there's another table in there for that. Yes, here's the summary table for investment. Right? These are the things that affect, that either shift or move along the desired investment curve. Right? So it's really only the real interest, anytime the real interest rate is changing, it's a move along the curve. If the tax rate or the marginal productivity of capital change, that's a shift in the curve. That's why I said these are like the cliff notes of the chapter, right? Because if you can understand, and then the key is, how can I translate what's in these scenarios into things that shift the curves? Right? That's the idea. Right? That's the idea here. So I'm gonna go back over to the where we were. And let me just sort of, let me make this really clear that there are only 4 possibilities. There's actually something useful about drawing these out by hand. Actually, your brain does different things when you actually draw them out. So this is INS, 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 the real interest rate, real interest rate, real interest rate. Call that A. All right. Oops, not B, A. Okay. There's our starting point in all of these. So understanding this, we're going to use the same we're going to use the same diagram in chapter 5. We're just going to add some other assumptions to it. We're going to add this. We're assuming that the economy is a closed economy in chapter 4, that there's no trade with other countries. In chapter 5, we're going to open that up and think about this in terms of other economies as well. So there are only 4 possibilities. Either desired saving shifts to the left, desired saving shifts to the right, desired investment shifts to the right, desired investment shifts to the left. Like, that's it. It's got to be one of those. All right. Now, it's possible there could end up being a more than one shift, but typically we're focused on one shift, right? And so right, you just need to finish it out in each one of these cases. What happens in equilibrium? So any one of these is going to embody one of the scenarios that you have, essentially. It could be that something could affect more than one curve. Right? A scenario could affect more than one curve, but for the most part, it's going to focus on one of the curves, but it's possible, right? That can happen. So what do you know? What did you notice about the tables, those summary tables from chapter 4 that I was just showing you from the textbook? What do you notice about those tables? This is like a Rorschach ink blot test question. Right, so there was table, I don't remember if it was table 5 and table 6, or I don't remember what the numbers were now, actually. Right, one has to do with desired saving, the other one had to do with desired investment. Right, these tables, and there was a list of things that affected decisions by consumers, or either private saving or government saving. All right, and then certain things, and then things that affected the profit maximization by firms, right? They're the ones making decisions. That's where we started this all, right? So this is firms making decisions. What did you notice about those two lists?
The same variables are in both.
One of them is the real interest rate, right? R. But that's the only one. In fact, that's an observation that they're different. The only one that's there, the only one that is the same is R, and so that's why we can use that on the vertical axis. That one is common to both. The real, and I'll come back, I can come back to that, but in a moment. So that's actually a point that they're different. What else do you notice? This list is a lot longer over here than that one. So just if you were starting out, just if you were guessing, you might say, probably going to shift desired saving. But then you say, like, well, but Dr. Simpkins wants us to get practice with like all of them. So probably he puts something in there, probably puts something that's going to do that too. All right. So, but just noticing that in this market, there are more different kinds of things that affect this market, probably on the saving side, partly because it's private saving plus government saving. So policy by Congress. So government, this SG, saving by the government. This has to do with government spending, taxes, transfer payments. It's like food stamps, SNAP, right? Benefits, etc. Right? So who makes decisions about that? Congress and the president. That's what we call fiscal policy. So that's to do with the budget. So anything dealing with the budget, it's the first impact's going to be on national saving. Right. There might be other impacts from that, depending what the government spends its money on. Let me give you an example and relate what's in this chapter to point. I want to make a point about how the things we've learned before are we build on that, and what that means. So back from chapter 2, we have this uses of saving identity. One of the questions on the exam, right? First question on the exam. You can see the video that I'll post later tonight, going through this, right? But what's in that video? What the question's about, right? And I really want to use this because in chapter 4, but we can relate. This is there's going to be in chapter 4 and in chapter 5. It's going to be a direct outgrowth of this. So on exam 1, it says, what happens if there are bigger budget deficits? This goes down, right? Saving by the government goes down. That's just a definitional thing from what SG is, right? It's saving by the government is taxes minus transfer payments it needs to pay, minus interest on the debt, minus government spending. So if government spending goes up, then the saving by the government goes down. Bigger budget deficits means either less taxes or more spending or both. All right. So what's got to be true, right? There's an equal sign here. What has to be true on the right-hand side if this part isn't changing? What's got to be true just from this identity, just from the math of it? You don't even have to know any economics to answer this one. So if this was 100 equals 100, this went down to 80. What's got to happen on the other side of the equal sign? Can 80 equal 100? No, right? So what has to happen on the right-hand side in that case? Yeah. So Felia's saying in the chat, it has to decrease. Yeah, it has to go down to 80, right? I mean, it has to be equal, right? So for that to go down to 80, what had to have happened? That had to go down, or that had to go down, or both? That's question 1 on the last on exam 1. That right there, that was the answer essentially. That, like, not much more than that actually. All right, it's question 1 on the exam, the first part of question 1. All right, so if government saving, so in a closed economy, there's no current account, there's no trade with other countries. Now I'm bringing it forward to chapter 4. So that goes away. So if that's not there, if that's 0, right, then we're just making an assumption for we're simplifying even further in chapter 4. Closed economy, no trade with other countries. It can't be any current account. So that has to do with trade with other countries. So in that case, it's all on I, right? So what is the uses of saving identity? And so the question on the exam was, why should we be concerned potentially about bigger budget deficits? Because they could reduce investment in new capital. And if that's the case, what we know from our production function is that reduces the production function, and that leads to less growth. So that can crowd out private investment. What do we learn in chapter 4 about the impacts of right, so SP plus SG, private saving plus government saving? So what do we learn here? So if saving by the government is going down, which way does the curve shift? That's getting smaller. Bigger negative number, actually, because we have a budget deficit. It's a negative number, but it's getting bigger in a negative way. Which way is this curve going to shift? Bigger that way, smaller that way. Which way is it going to shift? If it reduces national savings, it's got to shift to the left, right? That's the smaller, right? That's smaller that way, right? So it shifts to the left. If it shifts to the left, what happens to investment and saving? Real interest rates go up, and investment gets smaller. Now we have the economics behind uses of saving identity from chapter 2. That's why. That's what happens. When we bring in chapter 5, or in chapter 5, we're going to be able to link it to that as well, and this diagram. So, what is our economic theory? What does our model say? The uses of saving identity is just an identity. It's just an equation. It's a measurement equation in the economy. That's what chapter 2 is about, measuring the economy. Here we have some economic theory, right? If the government increases spending, reduces taxes, that shifts desired saving to the left, that increases the real interest rate. It makes it more expensive to borrow money for firms. They're going to invest in less new machinery because it costs more to borrow the money for that machinery. So that's a move along the curve as the real interest rate rises, and they're going to end up with less investment in new capital. That's called crowding out. The government comes in, spends more money, bigger budget deficit, right? And they crowd out private investment. Right? So politically, right, the way that comes out, right? It's not the economic, it's just the economics. It's just the way it is, what the model says, right? But people in different political parties will then use that and say, see, we should keep government out of that because private investors, companies know how to use that capital better than the government does. All right. So the government may have been spending more money on infrastructure. All right. Investing in roads and bridges and seaports and broadband connections. Or they may have been spending more money on checks for COVID to you and me. In each case, that's going to increase the budget deficit. Right? It's going to lead to that kind of shift. But then the question is, what impact does it have over all the economy in the long run? Does it matter what the government is spending its money on? Right? That's the question. That was also related to an exam question from homework 1, or from exam 1. So that, what we just talked about there, is directly related to question 3 on the homework. That's the direct discussion of question 3 in the homework. So what I need you to do is I need you to get familiar with using the graphs, the model, to frame your thinking. The mantra is, here's a scenario, here's an event. Which market? We don't need to worry about that for this chapter. The market's the goods market. That's the one we're focused on. Which market? Which curve? Is it desired investment? Is it desired saving? Does it have to do with consumers and the government making decisions about how much to spend? Or does it have to do with businesses making decisions about how much to spend on capital? That will determine which one of those curves shifts. Which way? Increase to the right, decrease to the left. And then the question is, what happens when we get to the new equilibrium? What's happened to the real interest rate? What's happened to investment spending and saving overall in the economy? When we get to chapter 9, we're going to use this market and use these shifts to create a new curve called the IS curve. Where does the IS come from? It comes from the I and the S in this market. And then we're going to ask, what causes the IS curve to shift to the right or to the left? And that's going to lead to another curve, the aggregate demand curve. The demand curve is what you learn about in principles of macroeconomics in the basic macro course. So these are all the building blocks leading up to that. So for right now, we just got to really understand this. You need to understand what's in those two summary tables, essentially, in chapter 4. And if something doesn't make sense in that table, then you go back to that section in the chapter, or you go to the demonstration videos, all right, and to think about what causes the curve to shift, move along the curve, and then it's just a matter of putting it all together. That's why there actually wasn't a video in the demonstration videos that had it all together, because once you know what causes the curves to shift, it's just a matter of putting it all in the same graph and then just shifting the curve and figuring out where the lines cross again after the shift. But I thought it would be helpful to actually do an example of that in the demonstration videos. So every one of these scenarios is going to be a shift in one or both of these curves. And you need to relate that to the stuff that's in those summary tables, right? And then just work it through. Everybody's brain is hurting now. You're welcome, Felita. So while we go into the weeds here, and we haven't fully gone into the weeds, because it's important for you to understand, why does this desired saving curve slope upward? Why does the investment curve slope downward? Right, and that's important as well. But in the end, we're going to really be focused on what shifts the curves as well, and even more so. But it goes back to understanding that those curves represent different groups of people. In terms of national saving, it's private saving by consumers. It's the government saving. Congress and president make those decisions through legislation, the budget. And that desired investment is by firms making decisions about profit maximization and how much capital to buy to maximize their profits, right? Just like they make decisions about how much labor to purchase, to hire in the labor market. So everything is actually tied together here. So let me draw you a diagram. This is not in the book. Maybe this will help. Maybe it's in a principle. It's always in a principles text. And when I teach the principles in macro, I'll make a big deal about this. It's called the circular flow model. All right, we have households over here, and we have let's say firms over here, right? And households are supplying labor. Households supply labor. And what do they get? They get wages in return, right? That's income. Households take that income and they do what? They buy goods and services from So they spend their income to buy those goods and services, right? And in response, firms are also demanding labor. So up here, labor demand, labor supply, right? And down here is the goods market, right? Desired investment, desired saving. So firms and households intersect in the marketplace, in these markets, but then they also intersect sort of more generally. So all the stuff that's produced by firms gets sold, right, to households. Households buy the stuff, demand and supply, right? Ultimately, we're going to talk about that in terms of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And in the labor market, where do the households get the money? They supply labor in order to get wages. They supply the labor, and the firms use the revenue that they get from households buying goods and services to pay out the wages. So this is called the circular flow of money and goods. And then what we do is we add the government, right? And so the government, that's another actor here. And then we have other countries. And we're going to learn about other countries in chapter 5. So other countries enter into this whole thing. And the government enters into this whole thing, either by affecting firms through taxes, let's say, or credits, investment credits, or and also through taxes, transfer payments to households. Transfer payments are things like unemployment insurance, SNAP benefits, for example, interest-free loans to students, right? So the government sits in here, and then we also have this, that's Congress and the president, and we also have the Federal Reserve, who sets interest rates, and that affects all of this. They're outside the system, but they don't buy and sell goods and services, but they affect the functioning of this whole thing. So there's a goods market, there's a goods market, there's a labor market. We're going to talk about the money market. That's another market, demand, supply for money. Federal Reserve controls that one. And then we have these actors. We have firms, we got firms, we got households, we got the government, we got the Federal Reserve, we got other countries. All right. So that's our whole course, right? In a nutshell, in that one diagram. We just look at we put each part under the microscope in different chapters. But by chapter 9, the whole thing's going to be all together. We're going to have all that together in one big model. So right now, we just need to understand the parts. The part we're focusing on, we focused on in chapter 3 is this one up here, all right? The labor market. We're focusing on the goods market in chapter 4. And we're going to bring these other countries into the goods market, chapter 5. Chapter 7 is going to get to the money market. And then we're going to put them all together. Okay. So right now, just the goods market. That's what you need to focus your attention on right there. So my suggestion is you use those summary tables in the chapter, in chapter 4, around investment, around saving. Say, I understand that changes in those things that are in those tables causes those curves to shift to the right or to the left, except for interest rates. That's a move along the curve, right? And that shifts it changes in those things that are in the tables, which are essentially what's behind these things in the scenarios. cause some change in the economy. That's the idea. That's the idea throughout the whole semester, is that there's something that happens, there's a shock that happens, policy change, a shock, some change in behavior that happens, and then how does that reverberate throughout the whole economy? What are the long-term, what are the implications of that? And then what can policy do, either the federal government or the Federal Reserve do to try and move the economy in response to that shock? That's the course is about. I'm going to stop sharing. Any other questions that you want to ask before we end here at 7:30? Okay. So we'll end there. I'll provide this video later as well. After I eat dinner. And do a little trimming of it and then post it in YouTube. And so I will send out announcements when that's available. All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Have a good rest of the night. Yeah, everything in this homework boils down to which curve, which way, what happens. That's what this homework is about. So it's not complex in the sense of having to do lots of different things. There are ultimately what, 5 graphs, I guess, that you'll need to. 2 for number 3, really. In the 2 different scenarios there.
But for those 2 graphs, I mean, the basis of it is still the. Okay.
Desired investment, desired saving. Yep. The second bullet in question number 3, has you go back and think about how this relates to the material we did in chapters 3 and 6. Right. Because investment has to do with capital. Capital is part of the production function, right? And so that's the short version of the connection between what happens in the goods market and what happens with the production function and potentially with the labor market as well. All right, so this is kind of the first step at trying to see the interaction between markets, right, in the economy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So look for the video later from tonight's session here.